Everyone knows that I love software and tools and automation tools and stuff like that. Like I totally geek out on it. So as soon as I see one, I'm like, I need to have the founder on my show. So I hunted you down, Deirdre, and said, ooh, will you be a guest on my show? And so for those that are curious here, of course, Deirdre Tshien is the co-founder and CEO of Capsho. It's an AI-powered podcast copywriter. I mean, you've been an entrepreneur for years, have had businesses, and of course, you have your own show. Your own podcast, which we were just talking about a couple of minutes before. And you are so creative in it. And it is so different from any other podcast that I've heard. So for those out there, go to Grow My Own Podcast Show and find that and listen to it. So job well done, Deirdre.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me here.
So today, we're going to talk about your approach. You know that I love sharing podcasts and repurposing content, but I love how your approach is more about creating that content so that you have buyers waiting to like buy from you, that you're really attracting their attention, creating more trust, more relationships. You call it the content honey trap, which is awesome. And so we're going to talk about that today. So share with me kind of like how that even came into fruition, like what you felt that missing link was.
Yeah, gosh, I feel like I've been missing all of these links for many, many years. My first foray into entrepreneurship was almost a decade ago. Just really quickly, that was my husband and I. You might be able to tell from my accent, are actually from Australia originally. Yes. Grew up in Sydney. We live in New York now, but at that time, so we had started a business in hospitality. It was a dessert bar.
Yeah,
called the Chocolate. And when we started that, we were young, naive, and we fully believed in the strategy of build it and they will come. That was what we were banking on.
Who doesn't, for sure.
Right. Yeah. Well, as we know by now, that is not a strategy that works. So we built it and they did not come. And so that was, I firm believer, and I think any entrepreneur are firm believers of the fact that we have to make mistakes to learn from them and get better. So every single mistake that you could make in marketing, in entrepreneurship, in sales, like I made them all. And in different businesses and from different perspectives. And to answer your question, how kind of it all started coming together was with fast forward. So we opened our first business 2013. I'll just give you a quick run through.
Totally.
So opened the Chocolate. That's a dessert bar. We grew that to, after struggling, but being on Struggle Street, we actually ended up growing that brand to 5 locations in Sydney.
Wow.
We created a burger restaurant as well, and we have 2 locations of those. And then in end of 2018, we found out that one of our store managers had been stealing from us like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah, I know. And that was kind of almost the jolt that we needed out of this path that we were on. We were just kind of doing it because we were on it.
Yeah.
But it was a really great circuit breaker for me. I was at the same time exploring this other business with another co-founder, my co-founder now, Bonner, and it was actually in fashion technology. And I was like, this thing had just happened, this betrayal. I was like rethinking everything and my life. And I was just like, you know what? Let's just move. Let's just go. To the other side of the world. And because we were working on this fashion technology business, I was like, what better place in New York City for the intersection of fashion and technology? And so my husband and I just made this decision. We were like, yeah, we're just going to do it. The stores in Sydney are still running.
Nice.
We spent, a good 6 months kind of systemizing it, installing a great team. And we obviously didn't know that COVID was going to hit. So we haven't been back since then, but I know.
There's the true test of it running on autopilot, right?
Exactly. So anyway, we moved over. I convinced Bonner to move over as well. And we hit the ground running, testing out this fashion technology business. Long story short, we actually decided to fail it. But it actually gave us a transition into agency. So we did agency work for a bit in the e-commerce space, and then we transitioned into coaching. And it was actually for that coaching brand, it was called the Growth Boss, that we started our first podcast. We again had no idea what we were doing. We started, we were just like, I didn't even think we had
as you go
to begin with. Yeah. And it was just one of those things where we're like, yep, we'll just muddle our way through it. And it was great. And again, we made all of the mistakes, but then, as you do it, you kind of get more and more like, okay, well, I want this to work. I want an ROI from this. I want, and so I started then really trying to figure out how to grow our podcast, because at the end of the day, that was how we were getting clients, honestly. Every time we would onboard a new client, we'd be like, how did you hear about us? And they'd be like, oh, I love listening to your podcast.
Perfect.
And we're like, really? Because we just laugh. Well, like Bono and I,
you totally have fun though while you're doing it. That's the best. It's like addictive.
Yeah. So I was like, you listened to us like laughing for like a minute on that anyway. So we knew that it was just such a great way to not only get leads, but to actually shorten that sales cycle, to actually convert them. And so I knew that if I could grow that it would become really, really powerful. And by the way, like all this stuff during, as we were going through this, everything was just happening intuitively, and especially as women, I think we do that a lot, where we're just like, oh, it feels good to do this now. It feels good to do that. And it only really recently, I would say, started coming together for me, like frameworks and why things were working. Right. So for example, I read this book by Daniel Priestley called Oversubscribed, and he talked about the 7-hour rule. And we were just talking about this before, because I was like, oh, why is a podcast so powerful in terms of shortening that sales cycle and, getting people just bought in? Like, I basically would hop on sales call and I didn't even need to sell. I put that in inverted commas. Right? People were just like, yep, I just tell me how much it is, how it works. And I mean,
because they already know and like you.
Right. Yeah. And it came down and I was like, why is this so powerful? I need to work this out. And when I read about this 7-hour rule, I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. And that rule is that, people need to spend at least 7 hours with you. And when we say with you, it could be just consuming your content to come to know, like, and trust you. And I was like, that makes so much sense. And because I buy like that as well, if I'm going to be honest. Right. So then I became obsessed with figuring this thing out of like, okay, how do I now intentionally, because before it was just all intuitive. It was just like, let's just do things off the cuff. How can I intentionally, almost deliberately, get people onto my podcast as my version of long form content? So other people, it might be YouTube videos, blog, whatever it is, but for me, it's podcast. How can I get people onto my podcast and spend that 7 hours with me so that they're sold like that? And that's honestly how Content Honey Traps came about. I've worked with Russell Brunson for quite a while. He's been a mentor of mine for over a year now, and he talks all the time about curiosity, creating curiosity, the hooks. His framework is all about hook, story, offer, things like that. And I was like, that's great. Obviously we know that works for sales. Like, he talks about sales funnels, obviously, and sales pages and things like that. But I was like, it's the exact same thing wherever you are. So for us to get people onto our podcast, not just to get them on there, to have them staying, and then if we go, where do people actually find us? Things like social media and stuff, like how do we get them hooked if I'm even there? And then on top, it was just like at every step of that marketing funnel, I was just constantly thinking, okay, curiosity. And that's how we came up with the Content Honey Traps and the 8 mental models actually that go along with that make up those Content Honey Traps.
I know, it's so good. And I like your approach, how you kind of weave some storytelling in, but then you're like, and we'll kind of go through the steps, but you tap into like even like what's trendy and seeing like what is getting action on social. Yes. So why don't we quickly go through like those first few steps? And so the first one, you said you reconceptualize the content on each platform. So I just kind of quickly want to preface and to say, because everyone always asks me this as well. Should I be on every platform? What platform should I be on? Or should I just be on one and focus on that? So what would your advice be?
I think it really depends on like your situation, essentially. If you're a solopreneur, it's just you, you've got to focus. Like it's a no-brainer. You cannot stretch yourself too thin. So for me, I have a team, and so I can be on multiple platforms at the same time because I have a team who can help me do that, right? So definitely depends on your situation. If it's just you or even just two of you, focus. I was actually like, this is really funny. It was only like a couple of weeks ago that I was on a coaching call with my coach, and we were like, oh, look at how clever we are. We're going to launch this new funnel. And he was like, are you kidding me? What have we talked about this whole time? You've got to focus. Like one funnel, that's all you're allowed to do.
That's why we have coaches, to rein us in.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So I was like, oh, what? You just rain on my parade every single time. No, but he's completely right. Like we've got to focus. And so that's the same thing with looking at, social media platforms. Like, we've got to focus because we can't stretch ourselves. It's not worth your time.
I agree. And for me, it's like, I do find it hard because you feel like you want to be everywhere to attract everyone. But it's like, and it's good to test, right? Like, and see what's working and what's not working. Like for me, I love LinkedIn, and I find I may not get as many comments or whatever, but I'm getting a lot of DMs and I'm growing a lot of relationships from it. And so I find that interesting. So I like that, it's okay to not be everywhere. And I bet you all the listeners are going, phew.
Yeah, totally. And think about it this way, right? Like, I know that it's so seductive to want to be, because that's what we're told, you've got to create visibility. You've got to be, on everywhere. And like, 𝗀𝗽𝗃 doesn't help with that. He's just always about that conversation domination, right? We're like, oh, how do we
content domination? Yeah.
Yeah. But like, honestly, if you try to be, how can you truly test and see if that platform's even working for you if you're like not even focusing on it? That's the thing that gets me right. Yeah, like you can't even know what's working because you're not even like doing the things that you're meant to be doing on it. So yeah, focus on one.
That's perfect.
And really, really dial that in.
Alrighty. And then what do you mean by content hack on that platform?
Yes. Okay. So this is kind of the way that this is my version of repurposing in a way, which is that I've tried this and, it hasn't worked for me. I know it's worked for others where I will, repurpose. I'll just clip my podcast episodes, and it didn't really work for me. So I was like, okay, how can I make this a little bit more purpose fit for the platform that I'm on? And so that's where content hacking came in. And really the background for that, or how you content hack, is you find who your followers or who your ideal audience is. And so you just want to find where they're hanging out. Like, who are they following? Are they, part of other your competitors' communities? Like, where are they? You would know because you know them intimately. And when you find where they are, you work out what is the content that's really working for that account, for that person, or whatever it is. And you hack it. Because the great thing is that you know that your ideal audience, it's resonating with the ideal audience because it's working clearly for them. So when I say hack it, what I mean is that you use it as inspiration to then bring your own content to life. So how I do that with my podcast is I still leverage the theme or the content of the topic of my podcast, but I talk about it in a different way, and I talk about it with using the inspiration that I found. So that inspiration might be, there's this great trending reel or TikTok, let's say reel. I'm more of an Instagram person. So there's this trending reel that's, taking off. I'll look at that and I'll be like, okay, how can I now retrofit my perspective or my content into that particular, what's happening in that reel? And that's what I'll do. And it's a lot of fun, actually. Like, once you get the hang of content hacking, social media actually becomes way more fun than just, I have to come up with things to post. It's like,
I know.
Such a brain. Yeah.
But we're not all built creatively. Like, we don't all just like, ooh, this would be fun to try this. It's like, and plus when we're so busy. So at least if you're going to see, okay, what is resonating, and you just take like 5-10 minutes to think, okay, how can I retrofit?
Totally.
Yeah. It just makes it so much easier.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, that's kind of almost the basis for Capsho as well. Just touching on that a little bit was the hardest thing, I think, for any of us. We're kind of, I think of myself as a non-creative creator, if that makes sense. So we're creators because we're podcasting, we're sharing our content, we're doing all these things, but I don't think of myself as that creative really, because I do get stuck. I'm like, if you left it to me, I'd be like, I have no idea what to post. I have no idea what to say. I'm just not creative in that way. And so it always, to your point, it makes it so much easier when you're not starting from a blank piece of paper, right? When you have you have a starting point and it's like, oh, okay, it's just like a 10% here or 20% there that I need to tweak to make it work for me and my content. And that's honestly how Capsho came about, because we were like, there has to be a better way to create copy for our podcast. And that better way, generally 9 times out of 10, is like, let's just not start from a blank piece of paper. So how can we use AI? Like, how can we use this technology that is just amazing to actually do that, to surface something so that as non-creative creators, we're not starting from a blank piece of paper?
I know, because that is the worst thing ever.
Yes, exactly.
I even get my team to like write stuff, and even if I hate it, it at least gets my juices flowing to like rearrange, change, whatever. At least it's a starting point. So that's perfect. And I like how you bring curiosity into the post as well. And by doing that hack, you kind of invoked curiosity. Can you give a couple of examples? Because some people they aren't wired to know how to implement that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So let me talk about a couple of maybe mental models like that underpins Content Honey Trap. So just to recap, Content Honey Traps at its core is all about curiosity, creating curiosity.
Yeah.
So a couple of ways. So we have actually 8 mental models, 4 that are based on sort of stories that you might share or you might tell, right, and 4 that are based on sort of value, learnings, tips, secrets, the actual like tangible things that you might be sharing in, say, your podcast. So I'll share one of each. So a well-known and loved Content Honey Trap from a story perspective is the cliffhanger. I mean, that is just like, right? Like, that's why soap operas have gone for decades and decades and decades. It just keeps leaving you on a cliffhanger, and you have to shop and watch it the next day. And so that's a really, really powerful one for any story-based type of podcast, or if you tell a story, or even like this in an interview, obviously your guest would share stories. A lot of times there would just be a great section that if you just cut off, people would be like, oh my gosh, I need to know what happens next. Right? So that's on the story side. Now, on the values or the learnings or the tip side, one that I love to lean on is the 𝗵𝗿𝗶𝗹𝗶. And what that is, it's kind of going, let's say we're talking about social media. I'm sharing about social media on my podcast episode. How I would use the 𝗵𝗿𝗶𝗹 is sharing about what I don't talk about. So for example, I'm talking about social media on this podcast episode, or the secrets to making social media work for you. It's not about posting and ghosting. It's not about cold outreach. It's not about something else. So by the time you're like, oh, but those are the things that
what
people
is it about?
Exactly. So what is it about? Come and listen to the episode. So those are just a couple of mental models that we bring to life all the time, and that we've actually built into the intelligence of our software as well.
I love that. And we will get to Capsho in a second. I love that you have the different models and the different ways, because it like triggers something, right? Because sometimes you wouldn't, or you end up doing the same thing for each podcast and it just gets kind of like boring. So your point obviously is to create that curiosity, to compel them to listen, and then stay longer and so forth.
Yes.
100%. Perfect. So you just decided to build a software? Like, how does that happen? I would love to have things too, but I'm kind of like, I don't have the wherewithal to build a software for it.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a funny journey, actually. So you know by now we had a coaching business. So at the time we were coaching actually e-commerce business owners, and e-com business owners, I love them, but they have this knack of just wanting to hide behind their product. And so all the time I'd be like, you know, especially when you're just starting out, you're the only differentiator, right?
Yeah.
Like we can all sell widgets, we can all sell clothes, we can all sell, you know, but you are the differentiator in your business. And so you have to tell your stories. You have to be the face of your business. And, you know, so they'd be like, okay, I get it, Deirdre, but I don't know how do I do this? So that's actually what prompted the first iteration of Capsho. So we launched that first iteration end of last year. And what it was a very rudimentary, very rules-based. We would prompt people through to tell their stories. And then we would take those, or the software would take that and convert them into a bank of captions and emails. So that was like the first iteration. And so we were like, this is awesome. We can help all entrepreneurs. And again, we hop on with our coach, and he's like, no, you don't. You cannot help all entrepreneurs, because you know how well that goes.
I know. Got a niche down.
So he was like, you've got a niche. And it was a really painful process for us, if I'm going to be honest. But we did. And, you know, what we always end up doing is we always end up niching to who we are. And at the time I am an expert who podcasts. And by expert, I mean coaches, consultant, service provider. And so that just made total sense for us to speak directly to them. And so that was who we decided to niche down to. And this is the power of niching, because then you start asking yourself totally different questions. And for us, it was like, what do we struggle with? We knew that we wanted to help, you know, these non-creative creators amplify their voice, amplify their message, help them with promotion, because that's so much of the time we just forget to do that.
I know. It feels like it's a nice to have versus a need to have. And then you get stuck, and then you don't get consistent. And then
exactly.
Then pod fade.
Yeah, exactly. So we were like, okay, what is the best way that we can do this? Well, we're like, we're already in the game of copy through the first iteration of Capsho. And we know how to compel people to do some of these things. So why don't we just build that intelligence into, and so that's how the second iteration of Capsho came about, which is specifically helping podcasters create their promotional copy pieces, assets.
Yep. And create that curiosity, and kind of like, you know, like I've done it once, and now that you've explained it, I kind of understand it better, because the way it spit it out, I was kind of like, oh, but now that you say like invoking that curiosity, I'm like, oh, that makes total sense. Yes. And so because it doesn't come naturally to you, right? You're just like more linear and facts, like listen to this podcast because it's going to share XYZ. Where the way your software spits it out, so to speak, is like turning that on its head and creating it in a way that is more enticing and creates that curiosity.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is perfect. So can you, for those that don't understand or know what it is, can you kind of share what it does for podcasters?
Yeah, for sure. So basically what you do is you upload your audio file of your episode, and literally in under 10 minutes. So it takes about, we say 7 to 8 minutes for the data to crunch in the background for Kathy to do it.
Like hardly any time, really.
Yeah.
That's like super fast.
Yeah. And on the other side of it, it will have a first draft of episode title, description, show notes, social media captions, and promotional email, and transcript as well, if you want to use that.
Yeah.
And you can edit it, save it, and then you download all of the assets, and off you go.
That's perfect. I mean, honestly, even for the transcripts alone, to be able to rejig and reuse and use for your show notes or whatever. And even like, come to think of it, creating a title for your podcast episode, even that can just get stale or like doesn't invoke any excitement whatsoever. Someone's just like, oh yeah, that's nice. Where it doesn't like pique that curiosity where, oh, I need to know the thing to avoid, you know, or whatever it may be.
Yes, exactly. I actually used it myself. We're launching a summit July 1st. It's going live. And I actually used my software to create all of the titles for.
That's brilliant.
And I was like, it just does a way better job than I could do, honestly.
That's wicked.
So yeah, super cool.
That's so cool. So sorry, you said it was obviously you have to email your podcast to your list. A lot of people I find they miss that step. It's like, don't forget to nurture your e-list.
Yes.
Like you still, even though they're on your list, you still want them to consume your content because you want to, create more know, like, and trust, grow that relationship so that they will convert. So it's great that you churn out an email as well to make life easy.
For sure. Basically, we just created all the things that we don't enjoy creating. So
that's hilarious.
Like, we'll do this too. Yeah.
And what has been your now that it's finally launched, and I know it was like crunch time to get the beta out and what have you. What have you found so far? What has surprised you the most?
That's a good question. What has surprised me? I think just the generosity of everyone, like in beta, honestly. It's not an easy thing. We literally spent the first week just trying to figure out sign up. Like, it was just the thing that was meant to just work didn't. But everyone's, patience and generosity during that time was just amazing. And now obviously people can get in and they're testing it, and we're getting such great feedback on the actual output. So yeah, super pleased with that.
Yeah. So any plans of, I know you just launched, so it's like kind of like when someone just has a baby, or when are you having the next one? Do you have any plans of like, what do you hope to grow it into, or anything new on the horizon?
Oh, so much. Like, we're already working on the next, like making the outputs even better. We're working on updating the UI. We want to put more rigor around SEO in it. We're actually working on not just, because right now we're just get it out. So we give a full transcript, but we want to do transcript by speaker, by time, but also chapter summaries, which I think is going to be way better for show notes, rather than dumping a full transcript. We're actually going to create chapter summaries instead. So yeah, we have so many things on the roadmap that we want to do.
And hopefully your coach doesn't tell you to not to do
it. We just won't tell him.
Who is that coach? I love that you think big and you're always like moving and growing and what's next. It's like you like go with the speed of light.
Yes. Yeah. I'm a high D, so I just can't sit still. I'm like, go, and super fast. My poor team are like, literally, they have to pick up the pieces behind me.
Thank God for team members, eh?
Yes, for sure.
And I love that you work with like your best friend, and your husband's in the business with you, correct?
Yeah. So he runs our our paid media, and he actually is our funnel builder. So he loves it, loves geeking out and that stuff.
That's awesome. I work with my husband as well in the business. And so I don't actually meet a lot of other entrepreneurs that have like a husband-wife team. There's like some out there, but everyone's always like, really? How's that going?
I think it's just definitely knowing who, like, as I said, I'm a high D, and my husband, my poor husband, he's a high S. So because we know that about each other, I'm like, where is, like, I'm like, go. And because he knows I'm high D, he's like, no, it's okay. It'll get done. It needs to get done quickly. And,
balance each other out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. And so how can people, I'll obviously have links in the show notes and what have you, because I do want to share your podcast and how they can get Capsho to check it out.
Yes. So if you want to get in touch with me, I am on the social media platforms. I'm mainly on Instagram. So come and follow me, Deirdre Tshien. DM me, let me know that you listen to this podcast. I'd love to say hi and share with 𝗵𝗫𝗁𝗲 as well that you did. Otherwise, definitely check out the links. Come listen to Grow My Podcast Show. So 𝗵𝗫𝗁𝗲 was just so lovely before we hopped on. She was like, oh my gosh, how you do. Your episodes are so cool with the music.
They are. It makes it fun to listen to.
Yeah, thank you. So if you'd like to check that out, then please do. And and then definitely check out Capsho. We're still in beta, so our beta program, which is free. So we'd love you to sign up.
It's great to try that out. Yeah. And I've done one episode on it, one of my own. And then this week I'm going to try an interview style and use that and check it out. And so as I start using it, I'll give you some more feedback. But yeah, I love how it's working so far. So it's pretty cool. Good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It means a lot.
All right. Thanks for being on my show. Great chatting with you. I'm so glad we've met. And for everyone, go to the links and show notes, and then you can connect with Deirdre and check out Capsho. All right. We'll see you then.